I'm here at St. Stephen's Catholic Church in Portland, Oregon, and today is November 1st, the beginning of our meditation and pondering over the four last things with St. Alphonsus de Liguori in his work, Preparation for Death. Now, I'm reading from an old beat-up copy here. This was originally published in 1868. That's a long time ago, by the Redemptorists. And then it was republished in the early 20th century by the Redemptorists, and then it went out of print. So, in the meantime, these cheap paperback copies were mass-produced and distributed all over the place. And then those went out of print, disappeared, and now we can find new copies, retypeset, and republished by Tan Books. All right, let us begin then with the aim of the work. This might also be called the preface. And in parentheses, it says, this should be read. Now some persons, so this is St. Alphonsus writing, some persons asked me to write a book on the eternal maxims for the use of those who desire to establish themselves in virtue and to advance in a spiritual life. Others requested me to prepare a collection of matter for the sermons of the missions and of the spiritual exercises. Not to multiply books, labor, and expense, I resolved to compose the work in the present form, with the hope that it might answer both purposes. To render it useful as a book of meditations for seculars, I have divided the considerations into 3 points, and each point will serve for one meditation. And therefore I have annexed to each point affections and prayers. I entreat my readers not to grow weary, if in those prayers they always find petitions for the grace of perseverance and of divine love. For us, these are the two graces most necessary for the attainment of eternal salvation. These are the two graces most necessary for eternal salvation: the grace of perseverance and of divine love. Okay, I'm so glad you're joining me, and I hope you will persevere. You have to pray for the grace of perseverance, that you don't just join us for 1 or 2 videos, but join us for the whole month. Now, that's a high calling, but it's not asking that much, because we wish to die well. So we start by living well. All right, let's continue. The grace of divine love is, according to St. Francis de Sales, the grace which contains in itself all graces, all other virtues. Now all good things come to me together with her. And that is a quote from the Book of Wisdom, chapter 7, verse 2. Now all good things come to me together with her. He who loves God is humble, chaste, obedient, and mortified. In a word, he possesses all virtues. Love, says St. Augustine, and do what you wished. Now, in the Latin it says this, ama et fac quod vis. The word vis could be translated either do what you wish or do what you will. Now, if we were to translate it, love and do what you will, then it suggests in our common use of the language that if you are loving, then do whatever you decide. Do whatever you do. If you're loving, do whatever you do. But we can sort of quickly ignore that what it's really saying there is do, and what it's saying is to love and do what you decide to do. In other words, do as you wish or do as you will. To will something. So you have your intellect and your will, and then you act upon that. So you think something, and then you ponder over what you're thinking. You make a decision, and then you act. So the decision part is the will. And your discernment over making that decision comes from the gift of counsel. So we understand something, then we ponder over how to act upon it, and by an act of the will we decide, and then we act. So love and do what you will or do what you wish. Then you're responsible for what you're doing. because you willed it and you decided. There's a lot in that little statement, love and do as you wish, or do as you will. All right, let us continue then. They who love God labor to avoid whatever is offensive to him and seek to please him in all things. The grace of perseverance is that grace by which we obtain the eternal crown. St. Bernard says that paradise is promised to those who begin a good life, but is only given to those who persevere. All right, well, there we are. We have the beginning, but we have to persevere to the end. So we look at the end. We look at death, which is a scary thing. Then we go back to the beginning, and how do we get to where we want? Because we don't want to end up as the dead man in the pool, and we don't want to end up as Citizen Kane, Charles Foster Kane. So it's a mystery. It's a mystery when we ponder over the end of a soul that did not seek out sanctifying grace in the end. So those are our warnings. I mean, these are classic stories of fiction. But these stories of fiction, the good stories of fiction are meant to teach us a moral lesson. Don't end up like this guy. Live well in order to die well. To beginners a reward is promised, says St. Bernard, but to him who perseveres, it is given. But this gift of perseverance is, as the Fathers teach, given only to those who ask it. So this grace of perseverance is given to those who ask it. We have to ask for it. Hence, St. Thomas asserts that to enter heaven, continual prayer is necessary. And, our Redeemer said, we ought always to pray and not to faint. And what is that from? That is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verse 1. It is because they do not pray for the gift of perseverance that so many miserable sinners, after having obtained pardon, lose again the grace of God. Their sins are forgiven, but because they afterward neglect to ask of God the grace of perseverance, particularly in the time of temptations, they relapse into sin. And although the grace of final perseverance is altogether gratuitous and cannot be merited by good works, still, Suarez teaches that it can be infallibly obtained by prayer. And according to St. Augustine, it may be merited by humble supplication. Dear God, give me the grace of final perseverance. That's what we need to pray for. We need to ask for it. And then we need to live well in order to gain that. This necessity of prayer I have demonstrated at length in another little work entitled The Great Means of Prayer. It's another work by St Alphonsus. We're not reading that work. We're reading Preparation for Death. But he's recommending this other little work. This book, though small, has cost me a great deal of labor. I consider it to be of extreme utility to all sorts of persons, and I unhesitatingly assert that among all spiritual treatises, there is none, and there can be none, more necessary than that which treats on prayer as a means of obtaining eternal salvation. To render these considerations useful to preachers who have but few books or little time for reading, I have furnished these considerations with texts of Scripture and passages from the Fathers, which are short, but strong and animated as they ought to be in sermons. The 3 points of each consideration will supply matter for one sermon. So we could consider that each meditation, each day, will provide matter for more. For if a priest wanted to use one of these meditations with its 3 points and its affections and prayers to prepare one sermon, that's the use that a preacher or a priest or a retreat giver could make of each of these meditations, these short meditations. Of course, it's short, but you open it up and there's so much more there. That's the treasure of these types of works, and St Alphonsus de Liguori is a doctor of the Church. If we haven't read the doctors, well, we don't have that foundation. We could spend our whole life reading just the doctors of the Church and never get through them. All right, let us finish up here. I have endeavored to collect from many authors the sentiments which appeared to me best suited to move the will, and have inserted several of them expressed briefly, that the reader may select and extend at pleasure those that please him most. May all tend to the glory of God. So in other words, today we've listened to St. Bernard, St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, Suarez, and possibly some others. And so whichever of these pleases us the most, we can extend our readings of any of these authors on these topics. May all tend to the glory of God. I pray my reader to recommend me to Jesus Christ, whether I am living or dead, and I promise to do the same for all those who perform this act of charity toward me. Live Jesus our love, and Mary our hope. So I would ask the same of you. As I am sharing this work of St. Alphonsus with you, I recommend myself to him, because he has promised to do this same act of charity toward us. But please, I recommend myself to you as well. Please pray for me, and pray for all priests. Pray for your pastors. Pray for all priests. Pray for me. And whether I am living or whether I am dead. You might be watching this after I am dead, in which case, please pray for my soul. Pray for me, living or dead, and I will extend the charity to you as well, living or deceased. Join me tomorrow then for the first meditation on preparation for death. Don't miss a day of prayer with us.